They're already live. Or everything over? Oh, okay. All right, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Leadership Blend Live podcast with your host, Ricardo Rice, and my co-host,
Simone Cherie.
All right, so we're back. Okay, so I have a funny story because Simone didn't actually realize we were in the studio last week, and it's normally me that forgets stuff. So I actually feel really championed right now that I'm not the only one that forgets things. But yes, Simone, we were here last week because David was here last week.
That's true.
So we were here last week.
Thank you for your correction. It's been a long week.
I feel great that I was not the one to forget because normally I can't remember anything. Yeah, I feel like invigorated right now because I never forget anything, and I'm the old one. So I never remember anything. So I feel really empowered right now.
I'm so glad.
I feel really empowered right now. All right, so in the studio with us today, we have an amazing guest, and we're just excited to have her. So we're going to let her say a little bit about yourself. Tell everybody who you are and a little bit about you.
Sure. So I'm Senator Kim Jackson. I also am, when I'm not being a senator, I'm an Episcopal priest. And I've been working and doing activism work in Atlanta for the last 15 years or so. And super excited to be here. Yeah.
Really excited to have you. Is Atlanta your home?
Atlanta is not my home. I grew up in South Carolina.
Okay.
But Atlanta is
Hey,
now
wait,
my home.
what part of South Carolina?
I grew up in the upstate part. I grew up outside of Spartanburg in a little town called Cowpens, South Carolina. Where are you from?
I'm from a small town called Hampton, Varnville, which is like right in between Charleston and Beaufort.
Yeah, sure.
Are they all small towns?
Outside of Columbia, Beaufort, and maybe Myrtle Beach.
I don't think Beaufort even counts as a big town.
I mean, only because of the military bases. That's the only reason Beaufort is kind of on the map because a lot of people go to Paris Island for training and stuff. But yeah, outside of like Beaufort, Charleston.
That's Greenville.
Yeah, I guess Greenville, maybe Spartanburg, depending on,
No.
So would you call yourself a country girl, like a Southern girl for sure? 100%?
I am a country Southern girl. Yeah, and I was actually born in West Virginia, so I identify as Appalachian too. Like that is a part of my roots.
Okay. I've never heard somebody identify.
And you're our first Black Appalachian.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go with that. I've never. Okay.
But that's so you have a really cool combination of just talents and skills and experience, which I love, and so we're very excited to have you. There's a few current events I think we should talk about just because there are breaking developments, and this is the first time, at least for the Supreme Court, to take up a matter as significant as the abortion, since all of these states have been passing laws, 24, to in some way limit access or limit the financial viability of pregnancy termination. And so one of these cases in particular, even though all these have kind of been lying in wait, is a Mississippi case, which Mississippi's law banned abortion at 15 weeks. Georgia, here we have the heartbeat bill we talked about to excess for a long time, and had a couple people on who knew a little bit more about a medical case of pregnancy and what that looks like and all the different things that can go wrong, and also just abortion access in general. And so overturning Roe v. Wade has been a big fear, I think, for a long time for a lot of folks. We have a 6-3 court at this point, so it definitely tilts conservative, and there's a lot of speculation that kind of just taking up this case in the first place is very significant, and it's almost making a statement because it could just be left. Do you think the Supreme Court should weigh in on this? Do you think that maybe states have kind of proven that we're incapable of being responsible for these sorts of decisions? And is it, in your opinion, kind of the court's role to make sure that happens, or are you actually worried about them taking up this case?
I'm worried about this particular court taking up this case at this time in our country. The conservative bent of our court right now does certainly give us all, I think, great cause for pause. And Roe v. Wade has been longstanding, and I think that it has worked for us. And so I'm very concerned about the particular makeup of our court right now that's taking this up.
So since you know so much about this background, and I also think just being a Southern woman, I'm sure you know plenty of people who are very pro-life people. But one of the questions, like a fundamental question we started asking, and Ricardo in particular highlighted really well, when this whole thing first happened, is like, why do people care? Like it kind of felt to you, and to me, very abrupt, an abrupt concern.
I still kind of feel that way.
Yeah, an abrupt concern in a state where, at least in Georgia, I think we have one of the lowest number of abortion procedures or termination procedures in the country. So it was very curious to me that this was even a priority, even as somebody who used to be a very, very proud Republican, that I didn't understand why this was a priority among other priorities.
Sure. I mean, we could ask that question about a number of Republican policies.
Especially now.
Right? Yeah. Like, why do they care about whether or not trans kids are playing sports when we have no trans kids in Georgia trying to play sports? Right? Like, why do they care?
Or,
I mean, it's red meat, right? Like,
yeah.
it goes to their base, plays at their base, and their base is excited to see that they're trying to address an issue that's really not even an issue.
Well, I mean, I know that when we were at IBNX, I think I found an article saying that the mortality rate was low. Like, people weren't having babies like they were at one time. So I was like, okay, well, if y'all had said that, then maybe I'd be like, okay, well, that might be concerning. We don't have another generation, permeating to replace all of us. So that could be a legitimate argument. But just for kicks and giggles, like, I don't understand, like, what you choose, especially as a female, whether you choose to have a child or not have a child, if it's not inconveniencing the grand design, like, why are we intervening into that?
Yeah, and one of the other important points that we always brought up was just that it has to be more than just about being pro-birth, right? Like, pro-life implies so many other things in my mind, and I think for most people it's about, what about pro-housing, or what about pro-education, or what about all the other supports that are kind of required for someone to not just physically be in the world, but to, like, make it to a certain age? And if those aren't going to be there, then how can you just be pro-birth? I mean, we're not even funding adoption agencies to the extent that I think you can just say, well, everybody who's ever pregnant just definitely needs to be into the world. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I feel like they should all be one big policy position.
Sure. Well, and the other piece is that in terms of maternal mortality, I mean, it's dangerous to give birth, and particularly if you're a woman of color giving birth in this state, especially, it's very dangerous to do so.
For sure.
So when we're not addressing issues of maternal mortality and we're trying to force people to give birth, then
you're trying to kill me.
Well, not you, because you don't want to.
But this is my prevailing fear, is that I could die being ripped in half.
Well, you'd have to have other conversations that they don't want to have, like expanding Medicaid, expanding Medicare, things of that matter. You don't want to have those discussions, and you don't want to extend them. So how are you going to make somebody who, and we'll just use, example, how are you going to make Keisha, Keisha, how are you going to make Keisha have another child when she already has 5 that she can't take care of and she's in the system, and you're trying to get her off the system, allegedly? So why are you going to make her have another child? Now, that's a whole other conversation as well, but why would you make her have another child when you're trying to get her off of the government assistance? That makes no sense, which you don't want to extend and want to cut down. So I don't understand how everything that you do sparks another conversation that you typically don't want to have. So why are we here? Yeah. Like, why are we here?
Right. Yeah. And we're also not willing to educate our children around sex education and how to do prevention for unwanted births or unwanted pregnancies. So there's all kinds of pieces here that we could actually deal with that would bring down the rates of people needing to terminate their pregnancies in the first place that we're just not addressing.
I feel like it's this knee-jerk reaction we have. Oh, that's hot in another state. Good, we should do it too. No, if it doesn't apply to our state, then we have other stuff to worry about. Yeah. Like, I just don't understand. I'm concerned.
So the second case too is kind of a major foray into gun rights, which I know are very important to every Southerner, if not a lot of Americans.
Well, I don't have a pistol, so
Mass.
I know. I can't stop looking at me like that. I don't have a.
Wow.
It's the hippy dippy in me. I'm just, I just feel like, we're just.
So you were just different.
I'll just stay in my own multiverse.
So does this mean you have a shotgun then? Like, are you being clear about the kind of gun?
No firearm?
Okay, so. Well, I can't say that. Well, I can't say that either. I was going to say it's not big in my family, but it is, because most of my cousins and my dad and my grandmother would shut home with the gun under the pillow. It is big. I just never adopted having a gun. I mean, I'm thinking about it, but I don't know. It's just never been something I haven't thought about. Because I was raised in a country where you literally could leave your door unlocked.
Well, yeah, but there was plenty of guns.
They had guns.
Yeah. What about you, son?
My mama couldn't use it, so.
You're like, plenty. I was gonna say
I was raised in a country where we have guns, and I live on a farm where we have coyotes and possums and things like that. And so,
you need especially coyotes.
The coolest thing watching my wife, her grandmother could shoot a snake right between. I mean, they have pistols hanging on the wall. I mean, just plenty.
That's so cliche. Like I just played. There's like a moose head mounted on the wall in P's mama house or something.
Deers, no moves.
Good lord,
no moves.
I mean, I would happily shoot a deer because they've ruined a couple of cars in my neighborhood. But
so. This particular case is about individuals carrying guns outside the home. And the response has to do with the mass shootings that have gone on in Colorado and Indiana here. California as well. Crime has been very high, including homicide in particular, not just violent crime, but homicide. Since the pandemic, I think the upticks, according to the Department of Justice, a report that they put out, and this was back in April, had Atlanta at a 63% increase, and it had other states higher, but Atlanta was still quite high. So I think this is very timely in a sense. However, it is kind of about self-defense, and there's also a whole bunch of other cases in which the idea of self-defense has gone, I think, quite awry, and we've seen people become very proactive in self-defense and creating situations in which self-defense is necessary. I know there are a lot of people who are very anxious to see this case and to kind of see this ruling. I kind of feel like there was a lot of polling done about how most people wanted more gun control. I think that was pretty ubiquitous, at least in terms of being a majority.
I mean, but what is this gun control? What is at the core of this? Like, are we just talking about how fast they can get a gun, the wait times? What are we talking about exactly?
I think it's the concealed carriage piece of it. Like, it's the concealed carriage part of owning a gun, which every state isn't quite the same that way. Like, there are different types of licenses. Many are easy to obtain.
Georgia.
Yeah.
Oh, big surprise.
No wait time.
Right.
At all?
Walk in the door, walk out the door in 30 minutes.
Oh.
You can buy a gun faster than you can vote in many places.
Oh, I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Especially here. I'm not surprised.
Yeah. One of the system questions as well, as far as mental capacity, like, have you ever been hospitalized or have you ever been hospitalized for a mental health evaluation? I think that may be the terminology. But as far as I can recall, it's a questionnaire.
That was going to be my next question.
I don't know what that looks like on the back end in terms of a background check or process, but it seems as though the application process, proceeds, and then it's just a question of, I guess, whether or not what they find out. But I
mean, you're not going to alleviate the black market where I can get a gun with the serial number scratched off. So, like, outside of, having a questionnaire, which then you have to pass that off to the gun carriers. I mean, the people that sell the guns, because, okay, well, we want you to background check. So who's going to pay for the background check? Because they're like, I'm not paying for a background check for somebody to get a gun because I just want the money off of it. So, again, other conversations you'd have to have around
Would you consider yourself pro-gun?
I'm not pro-gun. I'm pro-responsible gun ownership.
Okay.
I do believe in wait times. We look at the mass shooting that happened here here in Atlanta with the number of Asian women who were killed. That person bought that gun on his, quote, bad day. That's how the law officer described it.
Yeah,
he bought it the same day. He bought that gun the same day that he went and murdered those people. And so, having some wait time, I think, is a good idea. Georgia doesn't do federal background checks. And so, I mean, here's one of the bigger concerns that I have is that for people who are victims of domestic violence, you go through the whole process of getting a restraining order against the person who violated you. We have great statistics that say that if you have been in an abusive relationship, the likelihood of that person coming back and killing you is great. But because we don't do federal background checks, you can go and buy a gun and come and kill the person that got that TPO against you, right? And so I am very much pro-responsible gun ownership and background checks to make sure that we're keeping guns in the hands of people who we believe will be more responsible. I also think we should have training. I mean, I grew up, you had to learn how to shoot a gun.
Right. Do you think we should have high-capacity magazines? Do you think civilians need access? Do you think anyone needs access to?
I don't think civilians have any reason. I mean, so where I come from, you grow up and you have a gun for self-defense, and that's really defending your home, and for hunting. And when you're hunting for sport, you don't use mass, capacity weapons. For one thing, it destroys the animal that you're trying to take,
kill and eat,
right? And so the only reason that we would have a high capacity, would be to hunt people.
Yeah,
literally.
Yeah,
and this is not the Hunger Games.
That's not what we're trying to do.
Exactly, it's not the Hunger Games. So who should have those kinds of things?
Yeah.
Again, here we get bogged down in stuff that really does not apply to us per se.
Well, we have a huge problem, I think, in this country as far as and it's just, but the argument I think a couple of years ago was, well, we need more good guys with guns. That was I think that NRA's coined phrase, because we have such a problem with gun violence in this country that we definitely need to make sure that way more people have guns and know how to use guns, and that is going to solve a gun problem. That was their response. Doubling down was a common political response.
Street puppets in these offices saying this stuff.
What do you think is at the root of how much gun violence is in this country? Do you think it's simply just it can't simply be just access? It can't simply be access, because clearly, one person could have 50 guns and never end up making the headlines the way that we do. So what is at the core of the problem? Why is it Americans who can't seem to control themselves with a gun?
Sure. I mean, I think some of it is around some toxic masculinity that we have as a country. So men trying to prove that they're men by committing these kind of violent acts. The vast majority of people who die from gun violence, it's not through a mass murder, right? It's through these kind of one-off experiences. And so I think that's part of it. We have massive poverty. We have massive unemployment in Black and brown communities.
True.
If you are Black in this country, you have been living under the hand of oppression your entire life. And so that foments some interesting ways of trying to deal with that.
But to be fair, we are not the ones committing these mass shootings.
No, we don't commit mass
Statistically speaking, this is not us in these mini malls shooting them up in these theaters.
Well, so then the question becomes, is this really a mental health issue? Is that what we really should be talking about? That is mental health. Because, the guy that shot the Asian individuals was having a bad day. does that equate to mental health, or he was just having a bad day? I have bad days all the time. I don't go shoot up, and kill folks because I don't want to sit in jail. I'm too cute. But I don't just go shoot up a place. So it's mental health
at
the base.
Not for that reason.
I don't just go shoot up folks because I'm having a bad day.
You might have it easiest in jail being cute.
No, I'm not. No.
Okay.
You gonna make me say ugly things on the air. Let's move on. You can make me say ugly things on the air.
That's a very good point. I think there's something to be said about that. It's got to be deeper than just the amount of it. It's got to be a little bit deeper. So you touched on this. You said poverty, right? Which I think is a huge precursor to most of our social ills, especially crime. And I don't think it's definitely not a coincidence that increased unemployment, like 1 million plus unemployment claims, has a lot to do with the uptick in crime. Right. But a lot of people end up taking the fall for that, unfortunately. And I think we're kind of seeing that in the mayoral race, which is not just Mayor Keisha. I think mayors across the country, the mayor of Portland, and lots of other folks who have been you're kind of on the chopping block for this because they're for whatever reason, mayors do control quite a bit. But I mean, they seem to be blamed for so much, even in situations in which, statistically speaking, if there's a lot of unemployment, anytime there's an economic crisis, crime goes up, and politically that has a lot of implications for people. But do you personally think that there's a better handling that could have happened? Do you think there's anything that could have been different? Don't have to say about Atlanta, but in general about how everything has been handled. And have you noticed this increase in crime? What do you think should be done about it or could be done about it?
Sure. So we talk about the correlation between poverty and crime. Mm-hmm. And if we also look at the correlation between people being able to get their unemployment insurance and crime, there are also some direct relationships, particularly here in Georgia. So we have so many people who have not been able to get their unemployment claims, thus spinning them into poverty more deeply perhaps than where they began. And so I think we need to address that issue. Like, until we really address issues of poverty and systemic poverty in particular, we're going to continue to wrestle with crime. And also, people do bad things who aren't poor. Like, let's be clear.
Exactly.
That's true.
People who aren't poor do bad things too. But when we're talking about the crime that Keisha Lance Bottoms, Mayor Keisha, has come under, a lot of that is related directly to systemic issues of crime or systemic issues of poverty, and we need to address those. And we need to make sure that people get their unemployment claims, and they need that plus $300 a week that our governor is
expiring.
Kemp decided he voted against them putting an individual solely over that, so that doesn't send a good message because you really don't care, and then you stop the extra $300. So you sent this message that I really don't care about you guys. Just kind of fend for yourself. That's the message that's being sent from our leadership here in Georgia.
Well, we're also hearing, though, just on the other side of this, is that there are plenty of unfilled jobs. That there are just so many unfilled jobs.
Yeah, and are they paying a livable wage? That becomes the next question. Everybody's, stop the unemployment and send them back to work. People are not, they've had a taste of another side of life. They're not going back to make $7 an hour, which we talked about that last week. Right. And I was watching the headlines. Guess what's starting to happen? Folks are starting to raise them those wages. I read an article about somebody,
Chipotle.
But even the smaller ones. There was an article that I read that was talking about a mom and pop store, ice cream store, and he was saying that he couldn't get employees, and he kept saying the company line. He kept towing the company line. Well, nobody wants to work. He went from $7.25 to $15, and they got over 1,000 applications. Yep. And he was like, it hasn't even touched his bottom line because they were able to find. He was like, the customer service went up. He don't have to work with them coming to work. Really? Was that rocket science?
Right.
It can be done. Now they're having to do it. So I don't want to hear that crap about people don't want to go back to work. No, that's garbage. Y'all don't want to have the conversation about raising a minimum wage and paying people a livable wage. That's the problem. But you know what? Kim's so smart. So take away the $300 and let's see if everybody goes back to McDonald's making $8 and $9 an hour. I'll wait. This is my case study. I'll wait. Sorry, I feel very strongly about that.
No, as you should. I feel very strongly
about it. It's garbage. Like, it's not that people don't want to work. People have realized that there's a better way to live.
And you were saying that absolutely every single business can't afford that.
And if you can't, whose problem is that?
What do you mean?
Exactly.
If there's no one to provide the job, then there's no job to get. $15 an hour or not.
If you pay people a livable, I'm not even saying it has to be 15. It depends on where you are. If you are in an area where like for the country where we're at, the minimum wage should not be 15. They don't really need 15 for where I'm from, but at least $10 or $11 an hour for where I'm from, you can live off that. Live quite nice.
Live comfortably.
Exactly. You can live comfortably off 11. I'm not saying automatically go to 15. I'm just saying you need to know your area, what you did, because I'm sure you did the market research before you opened your business. You didn't know what the livable wage is, an acceptable wage in your area. I'm not saying it has to be 15, but something acceptable for your area, and you need to pay accordingly. it would alleviate a lot of other headaches you have. You wouldn't have to worry about your employees not showing up. You wouldn't have to worry about them being disgruntled when they're. It would alleviate a lot of that stuff. You
have to worry about them having to work 2 jobs in order to keep the lights on.
Which makes them even more grouchy when they get to you because they done been to their second job.
Oh, wow.
I'm just saying. Kim understands. This is like a foreign. Watch it.
Don't you dare. Listen.
Watch it.
I think there should be some level of there has to be some level of balance and understanding here for how expensive it is to really have employees, and it goes beyond just the hourly wage. It's all of the benefits, like that bare minimum health care that we have employer provided coverage in this country ubiquitously. It's very, very expensive. For young, healthy people, it's very expensive.
I agree. I'm just saying that you can start someplace. Most people, if you're really honest with a lot of them, they don't really care about the health benefits, health packages right now. They just want a livable wage. Start there. Then you can negotiate your way into providing some form of basic health care. Start someplace. They don't want to start at all. They just want people to come back so they can continue to rake up all the profit and not have to pay them a livable wage.
Everyone is like Jeff Bezos. I think that's the problem. Is your characterization of small business owners.
And
as a small business owner, it's pretty filthy.
And as on the opposite side, you love big business with the Jeff Bezos. Exactly. So
I'm a tech optimist. But okay, so let's move a little bit because we've had a lot of changes in the state of Georgia, and I think we should follow Georgia politics very closely. The whole nation is now. But there's a lot going on here that doesn't always get covered. There's a lot of good things going on, not just horrible things that people are reading about.
I would love for you to start with those good things.
Yes, we will. So we're going to talk about a very important issue, including the support for not just crime victims generally, but victims of stalking and domestic violence, which our guest today and a brand new state senator just championed all the way from the beginning to the end in a legislative session, which, by the way, I did not think very much was going to get done at all. I just didn't see it happening. Like with COVID, our state legislature was too happy to go home and just too happy to say, oh, well, here goes all these hundreds and hundreds of bills that were filed. We had to cut our session short like so many other states, but you got something done that I just did not think could be done so quickly. So can you talk about the background, the conception of this bill, why it was important to you, and then maybe you can talk about like how you were able to do that?
Sure, absolutely. So what I proposed was a bill that would allow for victims of stalking to be able to get out of a lease without any penalties in order to move to safety. And, the beginning of that started actually many years ago when I helped work on a bill that allowed people who were victims of domestic violence to get out of their leases. We talk about a kind of tenant release program. So, and that's been on the books for about 2 or 3 years now, that if you are a victim of domestic violence and you go through the court process of getting a temporary protective order, you can take that to the leasing agent or to the landlord and say, hey, this happened to me. I need to get to safety. And so it relieves people of that burden of all the fees for leases,
so let me ask you this for those that don't know. What does that process look like before this bill? Mm-hmm. Like, what did that process look like before this?
So before there was this bill for both domestic violence and now for stalking, it looked like women, overwhelmingly women, being often stuck in the place where they were with their abuser, or in this case with stalking, being stuck in the location that their stalker knew where they lived. And, some women and some people who have been victims have been able to get out, but they've had to pay thousands of dollars in penalties. I mean, think about what it is to terminate a lease early. And so you have to have a certain amount of you have to be real cash.
Yeah, you have a lot of money
to get out of a lease, right? And especially when you're fleeing these situations. So for a long time, sexual assault agencies, places that help people with domestic violence, they've been writing letters to the landlords and basically pleading on behalf of these people, please let them out without having to pay penalties. And that's actually where my bill started, was that the sexual assault agency in my county, I served Gwinnett and DeKalb counties, but the sexual assault agency in Gwinnett County came to me and said, hey, I want to show you an example of a letter we've been writing to landlords for stalking victims. Can you help us further this so that we don't have to write this law or write this letter? And so that's kind of how we got there. And, as a part of the process of walking that bill through, I've heard from lots and lots of victims of stalking about how much this matters to them to be able to have essentially a fresh start, right? To be able to move to a new location that their stalker doesn't know where they are, and they can just try to get their lives back to normal.
Can you talk about how prevalent it is, like stalking and domestic violence? Like we know overwhelmingly women, but like women of all colors, all ages, like how many?
Sure, women of all colors, all ages, and people of all colors and all ages. It is majority women. We actually saw saw the domestic violence rates increase during COVID because people were kind of stuck in homes.
Yeah, and they realized they didn't like each other as much as they thought they did, and yeah, it was just terrible.
Well, I'm sure financial stress.
People are hungry. People are cooped up. People are afraid of getting COVID. Like there's a lot of stress in the home. But in terms of stalking, we see about 1 in 5 Georgians are victims of stalking. Wow. So it's actually quite high.
You say 1 in 5?
That's huge.
1 in 5. They're almost 5.
Wait, are we talking about like levels of stalking? Like we talking about somebody's peeping through your window versus somebody like showing up sitting when you turn your lamp?
That sounds terrible.
I'm just saying, there's I'm a guy. I'm just asking. There's got to be like levels to it.
Huge.
I've had a stalker before. They just left like a letter in my door, but you know, I told you that was a long time ago.
Let's talk about that. Yeah. So I mean, yes, I hear you saying there are levels of stalking.
But I'm just asking, there's like levels.
Right.
To
sure.
it.
I mean, but this is the thing that oftentimes when people serious stalkers, they might start with something that you would consider like a low level of stalking. They left a letter in your door, right? Yeah. But oftentimes that escalates, and what we know is that 1 in 3 femicides, so 1 in 3 women who are killed, they are killed by people who have been stalking them beforehand. Mm-hmm. So stalking is actually a sign and a symptom of lethality. We know that your life is actually at greater risk if you have an active stalker. So those small things often escalate, and people get really, creative in how they do those kind of small stalking events, but they often escalate, and that's what we're trying to prevent. And so I don't care how minimal, quote, the stalking is, it is a reason for concern, and people need to get help when they find that happening to themselves.
Can you give some of the examples?
Well, let me ask a question real quick. So what would I need to prove that somebody's stalking me to get an order of protection or something?
Yeah, so if they're sending you lots of text messages or notes or whatever it is that you can start taking photos of them, if they keep showing up at your job. And that's one of the common things is people know where you work, so they show up at your job, and or they start sending you a whole bunch of gifts. This is one of the, kind of those love-sick people. They start doing these kind of really stalkerish things. We're sending a lot of gifts to people's homes. All of that is all evidence, and you can go and you can file with a court. You can go to your superior court or your magistrate court and file in order to get a temporary protective order.
Is there a cost associated with that?
There's not a cost associated with that in terms of actually filing, but there, of course, is a cost to your time if you had to take off work, right? So we acknowledge, I just want to acknowledge for people who are victims of stalking that getting those temporary protective orders, going through those steps does have a cost to it in terms of your emotional and your time. And so I want to be sympathetic to the fact that not everybody does go through that process.
I just want to make sure so if this comes up, they know, well, you need $50 to file. I just want to make sure that people, because I don't know. So I'm just
and I would encourage people to go and talk to their sexual assault victims advocates, because those folks will be advocates who will walk you through that process. So most major cities here in the Georgia region have a sexual assault center or domestic violence place that can really help you, walk you, and hold your hand in a safe COVID way through the process of getting those temporary protective orders. And then you just take that judge's order, you make a copy of it, and you give that to your landlord, and you say, hey, this is happening to me, let me out. And you can leave within 30 days.
Oh, nice. Good deal.
So to add two little questions, but first, since we're on the legal part of it, do you have to prove that it's unwelcome? Do you have to have like proof that maybe this is for the judge's order, that you've said like leave me alone, or that you've...
When you're bringing that to the judge, I mean, that is the fact that you're complaining about it is proof. But yes, I mean, most people you do need to have said, and you can get what's called kind of an ex parte. It's like an immediate action that doesn't really require a hearing. So the standard of proof that you have to have is a bit lower, so that you can kind of get immediate relief before you go through a longer process. Okay.
And my other question was if you can remember any of those examples. Like you were working with so many different organizations, and some of the stories they were telling were just like unbelievable, because stalking isn't necessarily just what people would think stalking is, I think, all the time. Like it's not necessarily like Netflix You, where somebody's got a baseball cap and they're following you all through like the neighborhood. There's lots of different types of stalking. So could you?
Yeah. So stalking means that somebody is harassing and intimidating you in a pattern. So that can happen in a number of ways. I mean, one of the ways that was something I would have never imagined was there was a husband and wife situation, and they were going through a divorce proceeding, but they were sharing the home, and so the husband trained his Alexa to go off He changed the password so that the wife didn't have it, and trained the Alexa to go off playing loud music at random times during the night, just to wake her up and to just keep her on edge.
People are so that petty,
right?
Oh my God!
And that's a form of harassment, right? Yeah. And we have examples of people who are having their cars surveilled, right? So people are putting trackers on their cars and can tell them where they are. I think the worst story that I heard was of a woman whose husband had continued to follow. He knew wherever she went, and she was only allowed to go to the grocery store and to the bank. And when she decided to go to the courthouse actually she went to the police station to try to get help, he knew that she'd been there, and when she returned home, he bashed her face in.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So these things are really dangerous, and getting help can be it's a huge step for people to take.
It's a risk, it sounds.
It's a risk. And so this was part of me wanting to say, like, if you are able to muster up all of the energy and the wherewithal to go through this process, then let's help you get to a safe home too. That's the least we can do as a state.
So did you have any pushback? Did you have any whether it was your peers under the Gold Dome who didn't get it or didn't like it, or was it outside actors like leasing companies who didn't like it? Or
I worked really hard with leasing companies. The reality is many of them will say, like, we don't want these people on our property anyway.
Hey, I'm about to say that. Right? That's not a good look for y'all.
That's not a good look. So they were willing to come alongside. And we had questions like yours from my fellow lawmakers around, like, well, if it's just text messages, should they really be able to get on their lease? Like,
were they men?
Of course.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Like y'all said, it's primarily women, so we don't really think about a stalker. Because we can get a gun, or we can get real aggressive if it's
That's not gonna stop you from getting.
I'm just saying that's just our
genital
mindset.
photos on your phone that you don't want.
Well, it depends on what we're talking about. Don't want.
So. Right. So I did.
They had those questions.
They had some questions. They were like, well, if we do this, how many times can you use this, TPO to move to another place? And I'm just like, have you ever moved before?
Right. You just want to move. Like, I'm just going to make up a lie to just move.
We have to ask from all sides. Jeez. We have sympathy,
crazy.
but we have a little, brain thing that we do. So we have to ask these kind of, I feel bad now because I asked the kind of questions they asked. I legitimately didn't have.
They're legitimate. No, I do get that because I was curious too, like what is stalking, because I've been accused of doing the opposite, which is ghosting before in like a dating context, and my reason for that is conflict avoidance, because I think some people are crazy, and
so
I've been in situations before where you try to be honest with someone and it backfires, and sometimes it feels safer to just disappear, and that's a genuine concern. I came home from work one time and there was a guy outside my apartment who had like kicked up my welcome mat, and he was like pacing back and forth, and he was really pissed off.
What did you do to him?
I just quit talking to him.
You ghosted him?
Yes. And that was his response. So and it was like 11 o'clock at night, and I did not feel safe.
So you don't take no blame for that. You ghosted this man. He might actually loved you, and you ghosted him.
He didn't let me kick my welcome mat. He knocked over my flower pot. he was pissed. So my whole point of saying that is that, like, I think if somebody needs to get out of a situation quietly, that's one of my biggest things is like, how would you do that? If I go to a court, all of a sudden there's a process triggered, like they're going to know, like it doesn't feel, it feels risky to me. It feels like something that would have been way too scary for me.
Right, that's right. I mean, there is some risk that's involved with it, but that's why we give you that temporary protective order kind of immediately with a pretty low level.
I think that's important.
And, if you violate, just so folks know, if you violate a TPO, if you violate a restraining order that's placed against you, that's automatically a felony. And you can immediately call the police and take action. And so there is some protection in that for when you're able to get it, right? Yeah. Like, that's the key.
I'm going to say that,
And I was surprised. I was glad that you took this up as well, because I didn't know that there was disparities from county by county and how it works. Like, I had a friend who was in Cobb, and she was dating someone who did hit her. And she found out that they weren't living together, so there was a certain type of order that she didn't qualify for.
That's right.
And they didn't have kids together. They were just dating, but they still like knew each other's residences and stuff like that. But I guess that wasn't adequate. But in Fulton, it would have been or something. So I was so surprised.
Well, so we did pass this kind of a companion piece that wasn't the bill that I carried, but it closes that dating loophole. So right now, if you were a victim, the only way you could be classified until this law was signed last week, the only way you could be classified as a victim of domestic violence is if you shared a residence or had children with that person.
Crazy.
Well, so if you were dating and the dude hit you, or the lady, if the person hit you and you're just dating, heretofore that was not a domestic violence. You couldn't have got a protection order. But now Houston Gaines out of Athens, who I'm not not really necessarily supporting him, but Houston Gaines out of Athens. Yes, he's very interesting. He proposed that bill and worked alongside the same advocates. We were actually carrying those bills simultaneously together to close that dating loophole. So now, if you are in a dating situation or you have been dating and you experience domestic violence, then you can get in a temporary.
That was written by men. I could actually get there. That was written by men. I could get there. Like if you.
But I'm sure it had to update with the times though, because increasingly people don't do that. They don't.
Yeah, they're cohabitating and not
kids.
getting married and stuff like that. So yeah, you kind of had to. But yeah, in the old days, because I'm old. In the old days, that didn't make a lot more sense. It's like if you're dating, y'all are not obligated legally or just in general. You can leave. Right. But when you're married, that's a lot harder, especially if you have kids, to kind of pack up and leave. And like you said, nobody likes to move, so I can understand that. I get that.
Another update, right, that was important, and I don't know if this was in the final version of the bill or the law that's now signed, but is it was there a cyber component to this?
So we did not make any distinctions, and that actually was one of the big pushbacks that we got from a number of lawmakers, was we make no distinction between cyber stalking and stalking. Okay. Because what we know is that what starts as cyber stalking often turns into in-person stalking. Mm-hmm. And so we made no distinction. So yes, you would be able to qualify with cyber stalking.
So it's just stalking in general.
Stalking in general.
Stalking in general.
That's good. I think that's really good, because it's not just. I'm sure doesn't start physical now, because you could just be in someone's DMs and just get keep following. There's so many films and shows about this. It's insane.
Well, they should never created you, because now that you talking about the had baseball cap and you following me around the store and stuff, that is concerning. It's like now we have this extremist situation. It's like, well, is the standard what we see in TV like you, or is the standard? So yeah, I'm glad we make these distinctions, because you just really don't know. Stalking is it can be a vague term. Stalking, like, okay, are we talking about somebody stalking me behind the grocery store aisle while I'm picking up grapefruit? Or are we talking about somebody that's writing letters?
It sounds so bad.
I mean, it's just weird. Like, who goes to if you're married and, that's your spouse, and okay. But how do you just randomly, like,
no, that's not
okay.
He's
asking,
it's not okay. I'm just saying,
are you asking, is it a mental health issue?
Yes, like, is that a place that we get through where that wall between what's reality versus what you think it is alleviates itself? So you're just like, I can't make that distinction. I feel like I'm really with this person, even though they don't know who you are and really have vaguely seen you. Like, it's just really weird to me. How do people get there without having mental health issues? Because this person, you have never taught this person. So how do you feel like y'all in a relationship?
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never actually interviewed a stalker. I've only interviewed victims of
stalking. We should do that. So. We should interview a stalker.
I think it would be interesting to hear kind of the mindset around it.
I feel like we have to have a mental health professional here, because I feel like that's exactly where we're going to go. It's like, so you were stalking this lady, but y'all never actually met. And they're talking about, how they felt like they were together and stuff. It'd just be really interesting. Yeah. And concerning.
And I'm sure in other situations it's more just like, it's just a power thing. Like, it's just like we were dating and now we're not, or you think we're not. Well, guess what? Like,
that I can understand. That I can get there, but it's just like when somebody stalks somebody that you've never actually met. It's like if I was really into, Angelina Jolie.
Well, look, I was gonna say,
and I started creeping her bushes. Celebrities deal with
this all the time. Celebrities deal with that all the time.
Yeah, but they're like figures, and like you could have a pinup of Angelina Jolie in your room, so you could.
Well, now you can just snap a photo of somebody and put that pinup in your room.
True. Or you tag them on Twitter and she responds. You're just like, oh my God, we're in a relationship.
I got some attention.
Exactly. It's like, oh my God. Like you and
hold on.
Like you and
just because I screenshotted the tweet.
Yeah, you and Shia LaBeouf.
Just because I screenshotted the tweet does not make me a stalker. I screenshotted.
What did your tweet say when you?
I'm not going to share that now.
Oh, well,
I just screenshotted it. That does not make me a stalker.
That's how this starts.
No, I did not follow up. I do not know where man lives.
That could be a place.
There's not a pattern of harassment.
There was not a pattern.
I'm just saying. I mean,
my tweet.
See,
let's move on.
See.
I want to ask about how it was being a freshman senator, and how it was coming from being who you are. I saw some really fascinating interactions between you and some of the Republicans at the committee hearing. I think it was at the Senate committee hearing for the bill. And I loved what I saw. And clearly you worked with Representative Gaines, and you've more than been bipartisan in getting things across the way. So was that a challenge? Was that something that you were prepared for? Do you think you were uniquely prepared for it because you are Southern and you do have a background that is religious, that is conservative? Like, was there more common ground than people may think?
Also, before you answer that,
yes.
on the other side, with the whole Park Cannon debacle that happened, because I know for me, I'm not even there, that was concerning. It's like, so nothing's off limits. This is a black woman who you've seen, and that was her job, and y'all still dragged her like she was off the street. Did that change the way you felt about the whole thing as well?
Sure. So maybe I'll start there. So I have been working as an activist in Atlanta for many, many years, And therefore, my experience with police officers has not necessarily been one that was welcome.
Yeah, wonderful.
So when I first arrived at the Capitol, so remember, like, we started right after the insurrections, and so there was a significant amount of police presence. They had, large guns, and I'm thinking, are they here to protect me, or are they here to protect others from me? Like, do they know which side? Like, I'm not sure. So that was really disconcerting, and I actually went out of my way. So there are some Black law officers who work on Capitol Hill. And I went out of my way to make sure that I introduced myself, got to know their names.
Smart, very smart.
A lot of them from, like they real country too, so we could connect around that.
Okay.
So that was hard and disconcerting. But I think in terms of this work of doing things bipartisan, I knew that's the only way you can pass a bill as a Democrat is you have to have Republicans on your side. And so I came in prepared to do that work, and really, I do think in some ways I was uniquely prepared. I've served as a pastor in Episcopal churches, which tend to be diverse in terms of political leanings. You can have some really liberal blue folks, and then you have some very wealthy red folks. And I've pastored them. So I've pastored both of them.
So you had a hometown advantage then, so you really know how to walk worlds.
Awesome.
I know how to talk to Republicans very well. And I even have, I was saying, I even have Republicans who are friends. Like
Black friends. Yeah.
So I was prepared to do that work. And, I mean, it was interesting. Like, I came in as the first out LGBTQ state senator and didn't know, like, how these, like, white boys were going to handle it.
Let me ask you a question real quick. So do you have a spouse or you're single?
I do. I'm married. I have a wife. We've been married for 10 years.
You have kids?
We don't have kids.
Okay.
No. So I was a little concerned because I don't know how these Republicans are going to do with it. But, it turned out okay. I had a number of Republicans who talked about, my daughter's like you.
So now you're the LGBT go-to person.
So that was, that was helpful. Or, I had somebody who said to me, he's a senator.
I just got this thought.
A senator.
You could have been like, oh, really? Is she a top? Go ahead.
Don't make assumptions about me.
Facts.
Right. True. So, I mean, I asked, like, I had people who were saying that one guy said to me, well, like, yeah, I get you. Like, I'm a male lesbian. I get that.
Oh, my God.
I was like, okay. I mean, whatever. We can connect on that.
Okay. So what about this other bill? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, I was able to connect with people in ways that just because I have that experience, and I grew up in Cowpen, South Carolina, with a whole bunch of country white boys.
I'm mad I don't even know where that is, and I use them the good when it comes to like little country towns. I've never heard of that. Now I'm gonna have to go look that up.
You know what a Big Peach is on 85?
Yeah.
Okay, it's right outside of Big Peach.
Oh, okay.
It's the little town outside of Big Peach.
Okay.
All right. So let me ask you this. Okay, so and I tend to ask this when we have, which we haven't had very many of them, but the TV show has people who have like dreads and locks and stuff. They passed that Crown Act about not being able to be discriminated against in corporate America and things of that magnitude. Has that been an issue? Like you having like dreads and being LGBT and being a black woman, like has that made a difference?
I haven't had anybody overtly say anything to me about my hair or my LGBTQ status outright. I mean, people will whisper. Like, it's interesting. Even fellow Democrats, when the articles started coming out about me being this, first LGBTQ state.
Because there are a lot of them. When I Googled you, there was a lot of them. I was like, okay, well, they were really interested in you.
So many. But, I had some Democrats that came up to me and was like, oh, I didn't know that about you, but I'm so glad. I want you to know I'm okay with it. So
it's like you need their approval. It's like, thank you.
Thank you for your support. So I haven't had, I mean, really, I feel like I've been very well received. And I don't know what people think about me when, what they're saying behind closed doors. But to my face, people have actually been very well receptive. And it helps that, when I'm talking to the old white boys, I can talk about, I know where to get some ammo. And I know a lot about farming because I grew up farming. I have a farm. So, like, we are able to connect on those issues. And that, I think, helps to disarm them
for sure
in a way that perhaps my locks don't.
Oh, I think it's important because getting things done is something that we always. Well, I think most people just want to see people that they like get things done. And the challenge with that is that it takes such significant compromise. It takes the willingness to do things that may not even be. Maybe they didn't immediately occur to you. Maybe they're not the number one thing you want to do, but maybe it's the number 2. Maybe it's the number 5 or 10. But to be able to just pass a bill is so hard. I mean, the process is designed to kill those bills. And then when you've got 70 voting esque laws coming up. Like I just knew, I was like, God, if anything gets passed with all this fodder, it would be a shock. And I completely commend that. And I would love to know more about what your agenda is now that you've had a year under your belt and going into the next year. Like, has it shifted at all? What else do you have to accomplish? And like,
oh yeah, because I live in Stone Mountain.
Yeah,
so I didn't realize that I'm under your
my constituent.
Exactly. I'm your constituent. So we won't answer. So what we doing?
What we doing? Well, we're going to continue the stalking path here. There's some more tweaks to that law that we need to work on, and so because I've become essentially an expert in that field, we'll continue to work on that. And then I'm most excited actually about introducing a sexual assault protective order. So right now, if you were a victim of sexual assault and you weren't dating the person and you're not married to the person, there are really no provisions for you in order to be able to get a restraining order from that person. And so we'll be introducing that, and that will have bipartisan support as well. And so that's probably the thing I'm most excited about. And then I have these other projects. So sometimes the technique that you have to use in the minority party when you know you can't get a bill passed, sometimes it's just about using your forum to raise awareness around the issues.
Gotcha.
So I work with people who are experiencing homelessness, and a major issue is being able to have access to an ID, in particular when you get released from prison.
For sure, yeah.
So I have a bill that I introduced that would mandate that the Department of Corrections issue an ID to every person who is released from their custody. If you can lock me up for 20 years, then you can give me a damn ID.
And you can't do anything without an ID. Like, you are absolutely done. You're stuck. You might as well go back because there's no progress you can make in your life without that.
That's right.
It's also not very expensive. So...
Right. It's not very expensive, but it's complicated. So I know that in the minority party, my ability to pass that bill is actually quite low, but we'll do a public hearing on the issue. So we'll raise awareness of it. We'll make DDS to have to come in and give report for why the Department of Driver Services is not always helpful in that, right? So we're just going to highlight the issue in hopes that we can actually make some movements without even needing legislation on the issue.
I like that. That's a good move. So I moved from Cobb to Stone Mountain.
Yeah.
And it's night and day. Like between the homelessness and once again the water boys, it's kind of concerning. Especially the only reason I'm concerned about the homeless is like when you get off an exit, because I live off Covington Highway. When you get off that exit, there are homeless like in the streets walking, like going window to window, and they don't care when that light changes. They're still standing. And when you're coming off an exit, you may not be able to see around the corner when you get off that exit. Like, it's really concerning for me, especially at night, because they're out there at night as well. And I'm not used to that coming from Cobb. And it really does. It's concerning. It's really concerning. It's kind of scary for me because I'm just like, okay, what if I tell them no and they get really angry and like bust my window out because they mad or something? Like, so is there anything we
I don't think that they're more likely to bust your window out than any regular house citizen, quite frankly.
Really?
I've spent the last 5 years working with people who are homeless. Their tempers are no less testy or no more testy than those of us who are housed. I don't necessarily trust y'all.
Right.
Why it's got to be y'all? Why it's got to be y'all?
But so what is there anything that can be done, and does it need to happen on the state level? Is it a county situation where we could have more housing, where we could have better support for housing? How creative does the solution need to be? Could the business community do more?
Yeah, I think this is going to require a heavy lift from all of us. That's from the federal government, the state government, counties and cities, and businesses. One of the big issues is that we have a lack of housing availability. And we have to really work with businesses, particularly those who own apartments, to get them to have some grace. So right now, if you have an eviction on your record, that's like the scarlet letter, man.
Oh, yeah. Good luck going anywhere else. I've definitely heard.
Yeah. It's just you can't. So we've introduced some legislation on the House side that would be basically eviction forgiveness. So, like with your credit, after 7 years, you get some forgiveness. We're going to try to get some eviction forgiveness. But right now, we need landlords to work with us to say, we will give people a second chance, a third chance, because otherwise the only thing left for them is the street.
Literally.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
Well, it's the whole thing is concerning. And if we don't tackle the cost of apartment stuff that's continually raising, you have more homeless people. Because especially now that everything's connected. Now that you don't want to have the conversation about a livable wage, how does that work? Because inflation is going to continue to happen. So if wages are pretty much stagnant or maybe going down depending on how you're looking at it, but apartment costs are going up, you're going to look at more homeless folks. And that's not just single homeless folks. That's homeless single, homeless families. That's right. So these are conversations that are connected that nobody wants to have, and they're only getting worse. So I don't. That's why I have to watch cartoons so they can woosah my mind. Because when you really start looking at these things and the avoidance of these really vital conversations, it does not paint a pretty picture for the next 10 years. It just really doesn't.
So can you share a little bit more about like how what your biggest takeaways are after this first year?
Actually, wait, because we only got like a couple minutes. So we want the dirt. Like, what pieces of legislation that are sitting on people's desks that we should really be concerned about that's coming down the pipeline? Because we got caught off guard with this voting rehaul debacle. Sure. Anything else we should really be concerned about or keeping an eye out for that's coming down the pipeline?
I mean, you should always be worried about them increasing criminalization opportunities. So widening the net of all the things that people could be arrested for. We got to be worried about that. Be on guard, always. One of the things that already happened that I think we'll see come back that people should be outraged about is that in Georgia, we as legislators have to approve compensation for prisoners who were, for people who were unlawfully imprisoned. So they were exonerated, right? They were found like, oh, we had you locked up for 25 years and my bad, we let you go.
It's basically my bad.
Yeah, so legislators, we have to approve the compensation for it. And so we had 4 people who came before us in one bill, 3 of whom were going to be compensated at $1 million because they were in prison for like a long time, like 30 years. And then one person, of course, is the lone black person. He was in prison for less time, and so he was going to be compensated at $500,000. We gave him nothing.
Rewind it.
In the end, the 3 white guys got their money, and we gave the black dude nothing.
They got the $1 million?
They got the $1 million.
And he got nothing?
And he got nothing.
Okay, so that's...
And this happens more often than one would think.
Sure.
I've never have even fathomed that, so wow. Like, okay, so the variables, how different were the variables? Like, how long had they been in versus him? Because I want to alleviate all of that.
Right. I mean, I think the disparity in the money probably did make sense because I don't remember the exact numbers, but they were in prison for the 3 who got the money, 3 white guys who got the $1 million were in prison a substantially longer amount of time than the black guy was. So the disparity in the money in terms of $500,000 versus $1 million, we were okay with that. It's this other piece of, he was found to be exonerated. He was exonerated. The courts exonerated him. But we had one single legislator who was from that county who swore. He brought in stacks and stacks of paper. I don't even know what the paper were. But he swore on his mama's grave that man was guilty, and therefore we should not give him any money, even though the courts had already exonerated him. And that man was such a loud opponent and boisterous and a Republican, right? Kind of a white male Republican.
How about say
right? That it stopped the process. And
one person.
One legislator.
How does that happen? Don't y'all like vote and has to be the majority?
He's able to sway all of his Republican colleagues.
I'm still very confused as to why it's a state issue. Like, so does that person? Is it never the case that a person just has to sue, just has to either find counsel to just sue for a certain amount of compensation? Yeah. Is that still an option for this person?
I'm not clear about that, and I'm really not sure why we've made it so that the legislatures have to approve of the dispensement of these funds.
Yeah.
That may be ultimately the better solution, is to take this out of the hands of the legislator, because for the most part, it's a rubber stamp until you get a situation like this where one legislator stands up and says, no, look, we can't do this, and don't dare call me a racist, because
okay, that's the next thing. I love black folks. I have black friends.
Yeah, it's not. Well, he has a black baby, so it's not.
But it's just like you said. It's perception is something, and even kind of serving on juries. It's like there's something about that process that made me nervous as a juror. Just hearing the other people deliberate and kind of understanding that these people were going to be responsible for this decision. As an outsider and as somebody who's from that town, I'm sure he did think that guy was guilty. I'm sure there's plenty of people who are not. They're not the court system, and that's what the court system is designed to decide. And so to me it feels so partisan, and it feels very partisan for lawmakers to be making that sort of decision. It reminds me of in Mississippi when somebody's trying to get their voting rights back, where they basically have to essentially pass it like over their legislative committee and decide that person can get their voting rights back, and they print it. So that person is now like restored and able to vote, but you can also like Google them and see that all the trouble that they were in. It's like a boundary crossing to me. It kind of feels like.
Well, it's concerning.
If the courts decide.
Sheriff and so on and so forth, and this legislator comes from one of those towns, and it's he's a byproduct of it. So you never know what can come up next with him at the helm, representing this small hick town that has all these racial undertones. So that's concerning.
Yeah.
Okay.
So always yeah, so looking out for criminalization.
I didn't know that was a thing.
In general.
Like, I just thought that was a federal thing, and they just kind of slap a number on it and you just go about your business. I did not realize that was a wow.
I thought there were lawsuits that had to be filed.
That's concerning. All right, so final thoughts. Anything you want to leave with the listeners before we head out?
Well, I want to encourage people to get involved in the legislative process. So if you heard at the top when I talked about my bill, it was a person who came to me. She lives in my district. She works in the sexual assault center. She came to me and brought an issue and said, hey, can you help us on it? That's where I get my best ideas for legislation. And when I have people who are interested in it, they also can show up for the hearings and testify. So I'm not the only one who's saying we need this. Mm-hmm. So get involved. If there's a problem that you see in your community and you feel like legislation may be the answer, reach out to your representative, reach out to your senator, and get the conversation started. And they don't even have to be yours. I mean, you can reach out to somebody who you think will be friendly to the issue, because that's how we get good laws on the books. It's when the people come to us with those issues.
How do they get in touch with you?
Get in touch with me. I'm at Kim for Georgia on all social media, Kim for Georgia. And you can always email me at kim.jackson@senate.ga.gov. That is the longest email address.
I wasn't going to say it, but
it's,
yeah.
It's standard.
Hit me up on social media at Kim for Georgia.
Simone, final thoughts?
No, I think this is great. I appreciate you sharing, especially from your perspective, and I hope we'll get to talk to you more. But it's great seeing somebody to come into the legislative process, and you seem to have such a command of it. And my assumption was that you'd run for office before or held an office before. But I see no trauma on your face. I hear no trauma in your voice. I'm excited.
She's an LGBT black woman in ministry at the highest level. Yeah. She's been through it all. I can only imagine. She's been through some stuff. So yeah, she was.
And thank you
for
encouraging citizens to get involved too. Because I even know as a lobbyist, it's great to have people to come and to talk about what's going on. We can do a lot of policy research and we can talk about those issues, and experts are very important, but you need to have people that represent those issues. If they just have a lot of sway. So
you done?
I'm done.
All right, so we want to say special thanks to Senator Kim Jackson for coming and sit with us today. It was a delight.
Thank you.
And so we will see you guys in the future. We will give you some dates, but we're gonna take a little break and have some fun. I want to sit on some boats. Someone wants to go lobby. I don't. That's fun to her. Probably read some books. That's fun to her. Meanwhile, I'll be doing some other stuff. So we will see you guys in the very near future. Keep an eye on the website, ricecommunity.com. That's Rice with a W for all the updates, what may be coming up, what may sneak up on you. And we will see you soon. So have a good day. And that's the Leadership Blend Live Podcast with your host, Ricardo D. Rice.